Hey everybody, my name's Ed. Okay, I thought it'd be interesting to take another look at politics and comics. So I thought it might be kind of interesting and fun to kind of compare a few different series that have come out not very long ago. All these series, they're different, but they're similar in certain ways. They're all of them have to do obviously with politics, with political division. They all touch on things like terrorism and insurrection, and and while they're similar in that they all deal with those type of themes, their stories are tightly different. Their approaches are type is a little bit different, and how well they actually achieve their goals kind of varies. So I thought it'd be fun to look at uh, Scarlet by Brian Michael Bendis and Alex Maleev, um, Divided States of Hysteria by Howard Chaykin, and Days of Hate by Alice Scott, Daniel Zizel, I can't say his name, and Jordi Belair. Okay, so these are all miniseries. They've all finished. I don't think they've all been collected yet, or maybe they. Well, it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. I have them all in single issues. Here are. What else did I want to say? A couple of them have interesting back matter and things like that. Or let's see here, how do I want to say that? They have interesting things. Well, we'll say we'll leave it at that. We'll say back matter that kind of enhance or attempt to sort of enhance your reading experience and what the comics are about and what the themes are and things like that. So okay, something that all these comics have in common is that they deal with insurrections or terrorism, and the main characters break the law and are ethically questionable. And in a couple of them, they're definitely morally compromised. So here's Scarlet. Scarlet is a follow-up to a miniseries that came out in 2010 about a young woman fighting police corruption and who inadvertently becomes the leader of a revolution. I thought the first series started out interesting, but it kind of fell apart halfway through. In this series, some sort of insurrection has happened, and Portland has been cut off from the rest of the country. So Scarlet and her followers are in Portland on one side of the bridge, and on the other side is the government, the military. Um, to talk about what I liked, I actually thought Brian Michael Bendis did a really good job of creating the character of Scarlet. I think he did a good job of giving her a full range of emotions. You know, we see her where she's trying to be tough. We see her in moments where she questions herself. He does a really good job of getting inside her head. One technique he uses a lot is having the character break the fourth wall and kind of talk to the audience. But it pulls off. He's actually able to pull it off in a dramatic way. It doesn't seem funny or comical the way maybe you're used to seeing in something like Deadpool or She-Hulk or an out and out comedy comic or satire. Um, it almost feels as if you've ever watched a serious play where the main characters would stop and talk to the audience and that type of thing. It works in a dramatic way that it's meant to work. The problem I have with it is there's very little story, not a whole lot is going on. I think part of the problem is it seemed like Brian Michael Bendis was trying to have his cake and eat it too. He seems to, excuse me, really go out of his way to not make anything about the story political. So, and I get it that he probably didn't want to make it a liberals versus conservatives thing or the right wing versus the left wing thing, but it ends up being a story that's completely about nothing. There's barely any story. He did a really good job of creating a character, with, like I said, without an actual, I don't know how to put this. There really doesn't seem to be any reasons for anybody to be doing any of the things they did, and then the actual ending is the most maybe implausible thing I've ever read in any comic book written by Brian Michael Bendis before. So the good part, in one hand, it's almost like we're taking a peek in this person's diary, and like I said, we really get to know her as a person. The bad thing is all the other window dressing and thing that's going on. He just did not deliver as far as having, like I said, stuff happen or reason for things to happen or anything to care about beyond liking this main character or whatever. Okay, so now I actually really do enjoy the art in Scarlet. Alex Maleev uses a lot of photo references. It's pretty obvious, but I think he is better at it than a lot of other artists who do it, in that at the end of the day, it still looks like comic book storytelling. It still works as a comic strip page. The way he composes the page, his layouts, it's clear storytelling. Um, the characters don't look, although, like I said, it's obvious that he's using photo references for the characters. There's still a certain amount of pen and ink going on, and it doesn't look like he just simply traced over some people who are just standing there. I wish I had a better camera so you can pick up the kind of subtle and nuanced use of colors, and I think it just really works, and really works in this comic. His use of grays and blues and just the color palette and the color choices he uses really enhance the mood. And I think it really helps the storytelling. Uh, what little plot there is. I don't like using too many movie analogies when I'm talking about comics, because I think comics should work as comic books rather than storyboards for movies. But having said that, I think it's probably appropriate when we're talking about Brian Michael Bendis and his comics. This comic actually feels, if it were a movie, it would be that movie that's shot really well and has really good cinematography. Although the story they're shooting is a little on the boring side. But like I said, I think visually, I think Scarlet is just it's up there. It's on point. I think it really works. And it's interesting to note the model gets a credit as well. Scarlet modeled by Ava, Iva. Okay, alrighty. United States of Hysteria. They actually pulled the original cover for this issue. This is issue 4. The original cover was going to be a cover of a man who's been hung or lynched, and then he has like Packy or something like that written across his chest. So when they first previewed that cover, it got a lot of negative backlash. So they pulled it and replaced it with this. Divided States of Hysteria is a dark political satire. The premise is that the United States is in a heightened state of political turmoil and civil war threatens to break out at any moment. An FBI agent has intel of an imminent terrorist attack coming to Washington, D.C. The attack actually happens in New York and the city is completely wiped out. The agent is fired but given a new position by a mysterious man and a chance to stop a second attack. The agent assembles a team to track down the people he believes responsible for the terrorist attacks, but the catch is that the people he assembles are all mass murderers who incidentally have loose connections to the terrorists. There's a racist black man who shoots white people, a Jewish con man who poisons people, a trans woman who kills a group of men during an orgy, a mob hitman who's a serial killer. Mob violence increases across the country while the clock ticks on the next attack. None of the characters are particularly heroic. In fact, they're actually evil and irredeemable. They're mostly motivated by self-interest. The FBI agent and the trans woman are the most sympathetic by virtue of not being 100% terrible. The story is dense, fast-paced, full of explicit language and violence. The intent seems to be to create a comic that, on one hand, deliberately pushes people's buttons while at the same time commenting on the state of modern society. Although Chaykin self-identifies as a liberal, this comic, United States of Hysteria, is very much meant to be provocative and challenge, quote unquote PC culture. This isn't entirely new for Chaykin, though. He's taken on politics and violence and transgression before in titles such as varied as American Flag all the way up to Black Kiss. The Divided States problem, though, is that it's almost the opposite of Scarlet. Scarlet has too little actual story. Divided States has almost too much going on. We frequently jump from scene to scene, and the dialogue overlaps, and the transitions aren't always clear. We're not always sure what's going on. There's a few concepts he throws out, and then much doesn't really seem to be done with them. It's fast moving and fast paced and entertaining, but it's also quite confusing. Okay, so for the art for Divided States of Hysteria, in general, I like Howard Chaykin's art, but in a lot of places, it's just really hard to tell what's going on. I'm sure part of it's on purpose, or I mean, obviously, it's a very, very fast-paced story. There's a lot of jumping around from location to location, and there's a lot of suggesting of multimedia things all happening at once. And I'm sure that's just to kind of put you in the middle of things and just make you see, or yeah, give you a feeling of just how chaotic this world is. But yeah, it kind of hurts the story sometimes. Sometimes you just can't tell what the F is going on. You have to read it 2 or 3 times. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having a dense comic. I actually like comics that are kind of dense and have a lot of things going on with them. But I I kind of think that yeah, I kind of need to be able to follow what's happening panel to panel. Um, Here's another good example. It's like I know they're all in a nightclub, and I know some craziness is going on. but it's almost a little too crazy. And what's interesting is in the first issue, they actually talk a little bit about the art. You know, here we start off with, a well drawn panel in black and white. Then we add the lettering. And then we add the coloring. And yeah, and all the effects. And it's just kind of, like I said, it's kind of this cacophony of things going on. It's pretty funny, even right here. They write so many ideas in a very limited space for them all. And yeah, I think that's actually kind of the problem with the art. I kind of almost wish he had done it in the black and white style he used for Satellite Sam. And that's another thing is I don't have the best camera again. So some of this stuff might look kind of blurry, and thus you might not be able to tell some of the imperfections, or I should say flaws. We'll say flaws. And they're just flaws in my opinion. Other people might think differently. But yeah, that's just kind of how I feel about it. I would have liked it if it was just like clear, simple. But look, all these captions and all this dialogue, it's really fighting with the art, you know? So, okay. And Days of Hate. Uh, Hate is an atmospheric political thriller. America has become a police state. The government is, or I say, a government agent is trying to track down a radical who's suspected of committing bombings. And we follow two pairs of people. The first pair is the agent and the ex-wife of the radical. The second pair is the radical herself and her partner in the bombings. It's largely a cat and mouse game between the agent and the ex-wife while the two radicals travel across the country and question the validity of their actions. The story is dialogue driven, but it doesn't come across as boring. There's action and plot twists, but it's mostly an atmospheric, like I said, moody character piece. We get to know the characters and are presented with some challenging ideas. The characters attempt to wrestle with concepts such as responsibility, justice, revenge, purpose, among other things. It's slow moving, but there is a level of suspense, and it reads much better, though, in one setting rather than reading it in singles, month to month, chapter to chapter. It's set in the near future, but it's clearly the author commenting on today's political climate. The art in Days of Hate I actually really do like. It's dark, it's moody, it's stylized, and I think it does help raise the effectiveness of the story. Um, a lot of places, some places, you get traditional, layouts and things like that. Other places, you get a lot of horizontal panels. I know I've mentioned before about how I think comics should look like comics and shouldn't look like layouts to storyboards, or I'm sorry, storyboards for movies. But I think here you've got a lot of nice color work here. The color, oh, I mentioned the colors before, Jordi Belair, but it doesn't look like. Um, I feel, in my opinion, it doesn't look like movie storyboards. It does still look like a comic that makes use in some cases of cinematic composition. But again, the faces are very angular and kind of, I don't want to say jagged, but people's bodies and hands and figures, they all have these kind of sharp edges to them. But it works. They're all very recognizably human. Sometimes you have to look twice just to make sure the people are who you think they are. But it's not a big problem, at least not in this particular comic. And like I said, the compositions are really interesting for the most part. And it's all the comic book, while there's some action in here and there's some violence, it's mostly conversations. And it takes some skill to have these conversations interesting and compelling, not just in the dialogue, but also in the visuals. Okay, and just to give you a little bit more examples. A lot of close-ups here too, which of course is appropriate given the way the story is told. And again, excellent use of color. All right, let's see if I can find one more that doesn't give too much away. Oh, here. All right. Peace. Okay. All right. Okay, so that's kind of pretty much it. The video's been kind of long. I've got to thank everybody who stuck it out toward the end. Just thought this was a really interesting kind of look at three kind of different types of comic books that actually deal with radicalism and things like that. And that's it. Like I said, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching. You guys have a good day.